Hi, and welcome to the channel. Today's topic is going to be about events, and let's just jump right into it and waste no time. So, we left it off the last time, being able to click these different parts in the sidebar and swap out the content of the main message area here. So, the next thing we want to figure out how to do, which makes sense for this application, is to write a message in here, click the send button, and send it off and update the messages array. Okay, so that's what we are going to focus on right now. So we're going to head off to our code. We're going to go to our index.js file where we have our app class, and we'll import our messages here. And we'll say this messages equals messages. Okay, so that's an object. That's all well and good. So now what we want to do is we want the ability to update this messages object. So we'll have to write a function for that. We'll say update messages. And what we want to do is we want to receive a message object and a message, let's say, message set ID, and then we'll grab the messages. Oops. So we'll spread the messages out here, and then we'll do messages, message set ID, push, message object, and we'll do this messages equals messages, and then we'll do take this and we'll grab that and put in a re-render function like this, and we'll call the re-render function here, and we'll call the re-render function here. All right. So what we're doing here is we're grabbing a message set ID, which looks like this. And we're using that to access the array. So this line right here will resolve to an array filled with messages. So for example, this one. And we are just pushing the message object, which looks like this. And we have to make sure that we adhere to that format. But we are taking a message object that we're getting into this function, and we're just putting it on the end here. So that should update our messages in this app class. So we are not yet using the messages because we're just importing them directly, but that's going to change as well. So let's go ahead and make sure we do that. We're going to pass the messages to this create messages function, and we'll go ahead and accept them as parameters here, and then we'll remove this. So now we're no longer importing them, but we're getting them directly from our app class. And that means that when we manipulate this property, we should be able to see the results being updated on our screen. So let's just refresh, make sure we haven't broken anything. Everything's still working as expected. And now we need to make sure that we add an event that listens for changes when we click the submit button, and we want to go ahead and make sure we call this function update messages with the message object. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure we take the update messages function and we pass that into create messages. And in create messages, we want to pass the update messages function to the create chat input function here. Sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the create chat input function now. And that's just right under this create messages function. And what we want to do is we want to add a event listener to this button. And on click, we want to just console log click for now. And we'll head back to our browser, hit refresh, open up the console, make sure that our event listener is registered, which it is, because we can see that it's updating here on the left-hand side. So now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we first create a message object, call the update messages function with the message object and the message set ID. Okay, so we have to accept the update messages function here. And let's go ahead and console log that just to make sure that we have the expected function. And looks like we do. So the next thing to do is to create the message object. And that needs to mimic, if we go in our data file, it needs to look like this object right here. So we need to have content, a timestamp, and for now we're just gonna put a default timestamp in. That's not really important, but what's important is the content and the owner here. So we need to make sure that the owner is going to be the current user. So let's make sure we put that in first. Not current user, but owner, empty string, and content empty string for now. Now we have hard-coded the current user here, and that just corresponds to this value right here. It's not really important. It's just a value that represents the current user of the application. So you would have this typically in a cookie or a JSON Web Token just to identify the current user. But we'll go ahead and just put this as the owner owner value. And then the content is going to be whatever the input value is when we call this function. So now we'll do update messages, and we'll go ahead and pass the message object. Now we also need the message set ID here. So we'll go up here, we'll pass in the message set ID. We'll accept the message set ID here. And we'll say message set ID as the second parameter to this function. Okay. So what should happen now is when we write into the input field and click on the send button, we should update the messages and re-render. So let's see if we did everything correctly. Hit refresh. And we'll go ahead and put our messages in the box and hit send, and you can see it showed up here right under the other message. So if we go here, let's go in and say, you should go to, and we'll click send, and it shows up in the message content area, which is great. It means that everything's working as expected. We can write new messages and they'll show up in the message area, and the event listener is functioning exactly as we expected it to. All right, so that's it for that event listener. Next up, we'll go ahead and introduce filtering here. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.